You're listening to the Four Phase Cycle podcast with your hosts, Dr. Alex and Megan of ZESTY Ginger. If you're looking to naturally balance hormones and learn how to work with your body instead of against it, you've definitely come to the right place. As a duo of an integrative MD and a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner and best friends, we use the four phases of the female cycle in combination with functional lab work and mindset practices to transform the lives of the women we work with.
We also have a whole lot of fun along the way. If you're new around here, it's best to start with season 1 before jumping around and plan to roll up your sleeves. Showing up for ourselves and enjoying our lives is what good health is all about. Just a quick reminder though, this information is not intended to diagnose, manage, or treat disease. Always consult with your doctor before making changes.
Hello there. It is Alex here with you. Thank you so much for joining me. Really glad you're here. Today we're going to talk about another one of these subjects that gets at telling the difference between two opposing perceptions, right? Because there's kind of a lot that happens internally and the things that we do out in life as they play out, where we're kind of wondering, like, is this good or is this just kind of the easy road, right? That kind of conundrum. And today we're going to talk about one of them, which is something I used to get into a whole lot, which is self-reflection, as in sort of analyzing how you're doing in an area of life or life overall, or is it beating yourself up? All right, so the reason I really wanted to talk about this was, like I said, this was something that was a really big deal for me because I have had a long history of being self critical. Got conditioned as a kid, just like many of us, and then played it out and I took over. My argument for that, the reason I was doing it that way, and I don't mean like the moments where you're like, oh, I'm ugly, oh, I'm dumb or whatever it is, but it would be more like something wouldn't be working out or something wouldn't be going my way in life. Let's say I set a goal for work or for education, right, at any given point in my life. And if I didn't accomplish it or I didn't do as well as I wanted or I wasn't reaching a goal, like my health was a big thing for a long time, then from that, I would call it self analysis, right? It was like me checking in on how I was doing. Though, as we'll talk, you'll hear it usually came to a point where I was, or came at a point where I was frustrated with how it's going. And from that frustration, I would say, what do I got to do differently because I really want this to happen? Now, that story makes it sound like it's a good thing, right? Basically, if you don't give yourself feedback, how do you expect to improve? And so I thought I was being quote unquote realistic and that this was me taking stock. I'm, not getting the outcome that I want. So clearly something is happening that I want to correct. And if I can, quote, get it right, you can hear a lot of these things as I was thinking them. If I can get it right, then I will have the outcome, right? That all sounds good because there is a time and a place for doing analysis and self analysis and taking stock of how things are going because a lot of things in life, it's one foot in front of the other for a while. Let's use something very common, right? Weight loss. People think about that. Or even self development, if that doesn't resonate with you, or healing from something. Day to day, it can get easy. It's easy to get lost in the flow of life and the things that come up and whatever. And some days are just a little less comfy, right? And so we have emotions that come up. Most of the time, it really is easier to sort of just keep putting one foot in front of the other because if every 2 seconds you're looking up and saying, oh my gosh, look at how long I have left to go, that can get a little old after a while, right? And so sometimes it's a season for putting the blinders on and just doing the thing. But within that, of course, there's times to stop, look around, lift your head up, and say, how's this going? Do I like what's happening? And we have the gift of emotions, luckily, which when they come up, that's often is our cue. But instead of always being negative, we can also have the positive emotions, right? When we are being more intentional, I was just sort of defaulting to that. But when we are intentional, we can say, I feel really great right now. What about this is working because I want to model myself. I want to use myself as the role model and get more of that. Or when things come up and there's discomfort, taking that as well. The difference, though, there with that is that we can use our emotions to remind ourselves to check in. But the reason that self reflection from a higher perspective of we are truly taking stock 30,000-foot view of how things are working for us, that process, once you've heard the emotional cue to go there, actually getting to the place where you're looking is emotionally neutral. This is looking at something from the outside and taking a neutral stance at evaluating, right? Because we do this all the time. If someone's evaluating you, or if someone is supposed to evaluate you, they're probably not going to get your partner to do it, right? They're too close. And that's the same kind of thing for us ourselves. When we are truly looking at the bigger picture, there's an invitation to really look at things neutrally so that we can get the information from the higher perspective, right? That's why it's so valuable because you'd be like, oh, this thing when I'm really close to it was making me feel bad. But when I zoom out, I can see how it's playing a part in the bigger picture. Right? And the neutrality is what allows us to see these kind of things, or, oh, that feels really good. And over time, I can see how it's really not serving me. When we are truly doing self analysis, that's the emotional plane that we're on. It can, of course, fluctuate a little, you get a little frustrated or bitter or feel happy and there's joy there, but for the most part, it feels fairly neutral. I was not doing that. So when I thought I was giving myself feedback, it was because I was waiting for a negative moment saying this isn't working, and then with very charged negative emotional energy, I was looking at the picture and then telling myself all the things that I was doing wrong. So it wasn't a focus of where do I find the nuggets, plus or minus, negative or positive, based off your perception interpretation, of course. No one else is going to tell you that for you. So you're calling the shots. But essentially, when it's neutrality, you see both sides of the coin. But my experience and most people's experience isn't like that. We're doing self reflection at the time where really what we're available for is to see all the negativity and then tell ourselves what we need to change and how we could be different and why are we messing up, and asking questions like, why are you like this? Which doesn't really have an answer, that helps you. That doesn't get you any farther down the road. So, what does this all come back to? It comes back to emotions and using them as a part of the overall beingness that we are. And that's why Megan and I have started to talk more and more about these topics, right? Not just the physical body, not just the mental body, but this emotional and energetic body. These discussions are very, very important because you can start to see how once you have familiarity and it's not even that you have to be perfect at it or really good, just you are starting to pay attention, you're starting to use your emotions as cues and know how to navigate them. You can see how now, as we're going through the last few podcasts that I've done, we are starting to use them almost like a radar for ourselves, right? Because that's how we're going to make the differentiation. If we're just thinking our way there, really the thought process is largely the same. You're looking at what's happening and drawing decisions from it. So if it's just a focus on that, which is what my focus was, you can get really tripped up and get stuck in a loop where basically it's like you feel bad and then you beat up yourself more and then you feel worse and then it's really demotivating and disempowering and then you're like, why is it not getting better, right? So down the rabbit hole you go. It's not the more thinking or the mental body that makes the distinction and lets you know what path you're on, but it's the emotions that will let you know which path you're on. And so it's the feeling behind what you're doing that lets you know whether it's true self analysis for your benefit and you are being honest with yourself and authentic and really looking at all the different aspects of you. And of course, there's parts where we all can improve, right? So there is some times where we give ourselves quote unquote negative feedback, but the emotions will let you know if it's actually sort of through the lens of seeing things as you truly are at a higher level, or if it's an invitation to feel bad and then continue sort of drilling yourself down the rabbit hole of, I'm just doing it wrong. And if I could force myself to change, make myself different, then I'll have what I want. Then I can be happy with myself. See how those get very, very, very different endpoints, and therefore the impact and the effect it has on our goals and actually getting to where we want, those are really different. Right? So it comes down to emotions. In the moment, then, let's say you're doing this and you're seeing how it resonates with you. When strong positive or negative emotions come up around a topic that I'm thinking about and I'm focusing on and I'm working on, right? If that's probably not the best way to say it, but say I'm focusing on that area of life or an area of myself. If there's strong emotions that come up, that's my cue to ask myself if it's time to check in. It does not automatically guarantee that that is the time to check in, right? The emotions, the invitation. Now, let's say then from that time, you can see how you're doing. If you're really, really spun up and everything feels bad and nothing seems like it's working, probably not the time to be forcing yourself to look at the bigger picture just because you're not in that space, right? It's like if you're in the water, not the time to blow dry your hair. They're just two separate things. That doesn't mean you can't later. You're just not going to do it now. Okay. So with that, you're feeling the strong emotions. If it's positive, great, roll with it, right? Go do something fun. Go have a great time. Because, even with strong positive emotions, of course, that's very accurate, right? And we can see potential and things like that. But sometimes we can gloss things over. So, of course, this is not a definitive guide, but this is just what I do. If it's very strong, this is just for me not the time to be going there. If it's positive, I go do something fun. That that's cool, and then I set a time to check in. If it's negative, that's where the emotional tools come in because that's the time to say, okay, these emotions are letting me know that something is coming up. I will plan a check in, but right now, what I need is to support myself in the processing and the feeling of these emotions and moving through that, right? It's the same way for a kid in your life or your niece, nephew, whoever it is. When you see them struggling or they're having a meltdown, most people are not going to be like, cool, let's go do math. Again, we do these things to ourselves, but it's really helpful to begin to externalize the interaction and say, would I ever do this to another human being? And most of the time it's not, right? If they're having a meltdown, we'd sit with them and comfort them. help them process the emotions, get through that part, then comes the time to do all the constructive things and whatever. It's the same way for us. So that's where, however you do it, talking it out, talking into a voice recorder, journaling, doing the emotional processes I've talked on the podcast, all of that applies. And then at a later point, with that more neutral stance for emotions, then the analysis can come, and there's, like I said, great value in doing so. Right? Just taking stock every so often, see what's working, see what's not working, make some good decisions, and move forward with things, knowing that because you're doing that then, you can always do it later. If you make a decision that you don't like later, you just make another decision. That's all it is. There's You can't go back anyway, so what's the point? So that sort of arm is much more common, right? And so that's really how I do it at this point. If we are at a point where something comes up, and for me, I really believe myself or have set the intention to believe myself that when it comes up and I'm in a, I'm feeling what I'm feeling, and I think, I feel like it's time for a check in. How am I doing? And then, like I said, sometimes there's a little more towards the negative spectrum of emotions. Maybe it's a little bit towards the positive, and that's why it came into my mind. But if that happened, I'm like, okay, if I thought it, then that's my invitation to check in. And as long as that kind of averaging out in neutrality is in play, then I get to decide, is right now a good time to do it? And sometimes for me, it absolutely is. It just sort of comes up authentically, it comes up spontaneously, and I just know this is a great time for me to do this. I'm in an emotionally stable place. I can see everything from both sides, and off I go. Even then, you still get to make the decision to wait if you would like, though. Okay, so this isn't, you know, a time, nitpicking the time, but what we are differentiating is we want self analysis and check ins and feedback for ourselves to be effective, right? We want them to be as accurate for us, accurate only from the standpoint that we can say that. And what happens is that in order for that to happen, we need clarity. And when we are all spun up, that clarity is missing, right? So it's not timing, it's how effective is this check in going to be? Is it going to get me farther down the road I want to go? Or is this going to spin me off? And I have done this where I basically put myself into like a 3 month um, tailspin by doing this repeatedly and just going more farther and farther and farther, at least in my perception, of where I actually wanted to go, right? Because I was just sort of digging the hole further into what was already not working by only doing the analysis when I was very aware of what wasn't working. And then I ironically ended up doing the exact same thing over and over and over again, right? Because I'm like, do it harder, do it faster. Ah, that's what the beating up gets us. And I think we all know that. This is not new information I'm giving you, but it's really, unless we are intentional with our plan of how am I actually going to check in with myself to like figure out if this is something I need to do right now or if this is a time where I need to go put on Friends reruns and just have a good cry and not think about it and just give myself the time, right? The response we can have is up to you. I like the emotional processing tools, and I think there's a time and a place for zoning out sometimes. Um, so all of this stuff can be however works for you, but don't play the game of I'm actually beating myself up and I think I'm doing myself a service, because after, I can say from personal experience, after looking up from that and realizing how much further I had separated myself from where I wanted to be, that hurt way more actually. So I really, really, really want and feel strongly about trying to get this kind of information out there so that other people don't need to have it be months, right? When we can catch ourselves within minutes, hours, days, that kind of stuff, then keeps us moving forward and we don't have to feel so frustrated and stuck and go down all of these rabbit holes that we really don't need to be in. So, I would love to hear how this goes for you. As always, this is such a collaborative process that we're all going through. So, as you apply this and as you catch yourself doing this kind of stuff, I would love to hear what you think. So, swing by, say hello, let me know what you think. Alrighty, thanks for joining me today, and I'll catch you next time.
Thanks for coming out to hang with us on the podcast. It is our goal to transform the way women are treated in healthcare. And we need your help. We need your help to get the word out. We have a lofty goal of 1 million downloads. And we know that as this podcast grows, we're going to be able to reach more women, get more amazing speakers for you, and bring the most cutting edge information.
If you found these pod classes helpful, please take a moment to text 5 women you know the link to the series. We appreciate your help so much. Can't wait to see you next time.